Praise the Lord. That's an important exhortation. Keep on holding to His hand. Keep on pressing towards heaven's wonderful land. Praise His holy name, saints. We don't want to ever let go of His hand, do we? We don't want to ever keep pressing towards heaven's wonderful land. What a beautiful series of songs here, and good sweet covering of the Spirit that we felt as we were responding to that. When you can tell the Spirit is present, then get close to the Spirit. Get into the Spirit. In order to be more Spirit-led, you're going to have to be more familiar with the Spirit. You're going to have a sensitivity to the Spirit. That's going to take some exposure, isn't it? Getting used to the work of the Spirit. And I mean in the sense of what you feel in the Spirit. You can feel some things from the Lord, can't you? Thank God for that. Thank God for the security we have that was expressed us in some of these songs. What we're building our life upon are some of these very things that were talked about in these songs. Somebody give me the names of each of these songs we just sang. See how good your notes are if you take notes on those sort of things. If that isn't love, do you think it was anything less than the greatest example of love, what Jesus expressed through His actions? What was Love Dottie Rambo's way of wording that? It gets you thinking. It's almost backwards the way you'd think of that kind of a statement. If that isn't love, then the oceans are dry. Are the oceans dry? No. Are there no birds? Is that what the next part says in the sky? Or stars? All right. Birds, stars, there's all kinds of stuff up there, isn't there? There's no stars in the sky if that's not love. You can see the stars up there once in a while, can't you? Once in a while, the conditions of this earth mask the stars. Now, I'm not getting deeply symbolic in that. But once in a while, the conditions of this world mask the stars. You may not be able to tell they're up there. The degree of light we might have in a largely populated area. This isn't a tremendously populated area. It's about 50-some thousand people in this city. But you can get to some cities where you're not going to see the stars at all unless you go quite a way into the countryside, because of the ambient light and other light that's just shining off of that city through street lights and lights that are on in homes and other things that might mask the stars, but they're still up there. There's some things that might mask your realization of the love of Christ, but it's still there. There's some conditions of this world, if you're not careful, they'll put a mask over the realization of how great His love is. You'll start feeling like, well, if He would let me go through this, does He really love me? It's where He's bringing you that'll be the greatest expression of His love. It's the fact that He's going through it with you that's a great expression of His love. Thank God for the presence of the Lord with us in our trials and tribulations, and in the dark day that we're living in, that there's still a light, isn't there? Thank God for that. So if that isn't love, the ocean's dry, isn't it? It's just a very poetic way of saying, of course it's love. An idiot could tell it's love, couldn't they? Forgive me. Somebody that has hardly any mental capacity at all could tell that that's love. You know, you don't need a great deal of intelligence to feel love. You do have to have an open heart. Your heart has to be open. You might be the most brilliant individual in the world, and this is the problem with many people in our present world. There's many tremendously brilliant people whose hearts are closed to God. Their intelligence will never lead them to God, but if they'll open their heart, they may be able to have an encounter with the Almighty through Jesus Christ, His Son. The foundation on which everything is built, that's our security, you know. Our security is Christ. We appreciate Him, don't we? Appreciate Brother Regis being with us here. Brother Daniel Regis from Florida. We had never met in person, but I know Brother Regis and he knows me, and I hope he'll share himself sometime here in the service. You know how services tend to go. Don't get scared. But you know how services tend to go when I know we're not having a night service. You know they're not going to probably end at an early time when I know there's no night service. So we should have time, I hope, for anybody that wants to share here today. But I've got some things on my heart after feeling what I felt in this song service here. What was our second song? I sometimes follow the songs. By the way, Sister Sharon, Brother Ryan, if I'm following your songs, that's a compliment to you, because I'm not following them because I don't have a message or because I don't have something on my mind. I've got quite a bit on my mind right now. I'm following the course of your songs because the Lord was in your songs. The Spirit was guiding those songs, and you ought to honor the fact that God has touched the musicians' minds. Thank God for that. Thank God we've got the kind of music staff that are open to the Lord to allow Him to touch their minds and give them the right kind of songs and things to share. What was the second song? I find everything I need in you, Jesus. Those are some good, simple statements, aren't they? Everything's in Him. Everything you need is in Him. You know how you know everything you need is in Him? Because the fullness, Colossians 2:9, the fullness of the Godhead, the fullness of God's divine power, and the fullness of God's divine authority. People get tremendously confused on what that's actually referring to. It's talking about God's divine authority and power are fully invested in His Son Jesus. That means everything you need is in Jesus. God put it there for you. Everything you could ever desire is in Christ. You don't have to go anywhere else, saints. You don't have to seek anybody else. You don't have to try to be in a relationship with some other person out here in terms of some other messianic figure. Everything we need is in Jesus. God made it that way. It was His plan. Jesus is the epitome of the plan of God. He is the plan of God in person. God's very intent put into a personal being that you and I can not only interact with like we might interact with God through the Spirit, but we can interact with Him because He has a familiarity to us in terms of His humanity. He has lived in a human state. So there's a special camaraderie. That's not a strong enough word. There's a special kinship. We talked about that last weekend, didn't we? A little bit. There's a special kinship between you and Christ that should create a bond in your heart once you come into a relationship with Him. And you'll find everything you need in Him. Everything you need. You don't have to search anywhere else. Now, what was our other song or songs?
This is my life.
This is my life. So now once you found, I don't know if they were playing it this way, but it's how my brain goes. Once you found everything you need is in Jesus, where else would you want to invest your life? Once you found that everything you need is in Jesus, and hopefully you find a place where Jesus is being worshiped as He should be, where He's being honored as He should be, where He's being presented in terms of the truth about who He is, as He should be. He's being given the glory He should receive. He's been given the position He deserves to have and that God His Father gave Him. You find a place like that really knows who Jesus is, I'll tell you, this is what you'll live for. This will be your life, is to live in a relationship with Him and among people who have a recognition of who He is. It's a blessed thing, isn't it? That's part of what we feel in these prayer lines when we're feeling something touch us in terms of an emotional response to the moving of the Spirit. The way you know that you're feeling the Spirit is because it touches something in your emotions. It can touch things in your intellect as well. But many times in worship, it's touching something in your emotions. There's something in your emotions the Spirit is interacting with. It's causing you to feel something. It isn't just a feeling of excitement either. It's deeper than that, isn't it, Brother Lee? Much deeper than just a feeling of excitement. You can feel excited when you feel the Spirit, but it's deeper than that. It should bring a peace. It should bring a stability to your life. We need stability in a day like this, don't we? We need something stable in our lives. If we're built on the right thing, our lives will be stable. Anchored, right? To the rock. We need to know what the rock is, don't we? We need to understand what it is that we're to anchor ourselves to. Every time I say statements like that, I start thinking of a whole list of songs. I could just preach a message on songs and give you a song after song. I'm anchored in Jesus. How about that song? Well, if you're anchored in Jesus, the storms of life are not going to prevail over you. The conditions of this world are not going to unseat you. You're not going to be lost out there somewhere, scattered in the wind, so to speak. You know that's what's going to happen to the wicked? It says the wicked are not so, but they're like the chaff that's scattered away by the wind. They're driven away by the wind. When God's done with the wicked, you're not going to find them anymore. You're not going to be able to search and go look at them and eyeball them somewhere. They're going to be gone. Like the chaff from the summer threshing floor, the wicked and the governments of the wicked and the political systems of the wicked and the societal practices of the wicked and everything that could be considered wicked is going to be removed from the economy of God, from the kingdom of the Most High, until all that remains is righteous. That's what it means when it says there'll be a world wherein dwelleth righteousness. It doesn't just mean there'll be righteousness in the middle of a wicked world. That's true right now. There's righteousness right now in the middle of a wicked world. One of these days, there'll be a whole world where there's only righteousness. There's a lot of scriptures you could use to demonstrate that, not only in some of the latter-day prophecies and end-times prophecies and millennial reign and after prophecies you'll find in places like Daniel or Revelation, but even in our statement we like so well, Brother Stevens, with one of these days the knowledge of the Lord is going to cover the earth like the waters of the sea. You know? The whole earth is going to be covered by the knowledge of the Lord. Won't that be something? One day the whole earth is going to be singing the same song. Seems like I said this, and it's odd because it just struck me. I think I said something about this very thing the same time last year. I don't know why it would have been on my mind this time last year, but I can remember talking about this. At this same time last year, I was talking about that crazy song that they used to sing for Pepsi many years ago. It says, I want to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I think I had on my mind something about singing Hosanna, and it made me think of that. But I want to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. Pepsi is not going to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. Coca-Cola is not going to do it. There's no company that's going to teach the world to sing. Some of them think they can, I don't mean the soft drink makers. Some of those great powers of this world that are social media giants and other things, they do think they're going to eventually teach this world to sing in perfect harmony with their beliefs. They're trying to do that right now. They're trying to bring such a feeling of overwhelming marginalization. What I mean by that is, they want to overwhelm you with the feeling that you are the only person that believes like you believe. And since you are, you might as well give in. Why would you want to be an oddball? Why would you want to be different? You want to be able to fit in with the neighbors, so to speak. You better not want to try to fit in with the neighbors unless you've got some godly neighbors. If you've got some ungodly neighbors, don't try to fit in with them. We're not trying to sing with the world in perfect harmony. But one of these days, the world will sing in perfect harmony. This whole world is going to be singing the song of Moses and the song of the Lamb, saints. And I'll tell you what, when this whole world knows the song of Moses and the song of the Lamb, and they're all singing it together, that'll be the best singing in perfect harmony you're ever going to hear. This time of year, we just had our music service here last week, and we're mentioning the time of year that we're in where much of the world, even if they're not even Christian, much of the world is considering this to be a celebration. Listen to how I'm wording this. A time where there is a celebration going on of the birth of Christ. I said a celebration. I didn't say this is when he was born, nor did I even say that anybody celebrated it in the early church. There's no record that there was any Christian celebration of the birth of Christ up until a couple hundred years after the time of the early church. But the fact the whole world right now is reminded that whether they agree that he was born, I'd think you'd be foolish to think he wasn't born. There's enough historical evidence to show that certainly a man named Jesus existed on the earth some nearly 2,000 years ago, and nobody would really argue that unless they're a fool. Well, a fool said in his heart there's no God too, haven't they? Nobody really argued that. What they'd argue is whether or not Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Christ. And even more importantly than that, because you can define the Messiah in a lot of ways, is he the only source of salvation? Is his name the only name through which you can be saved, must be saved? Is that true? Well, whether they believe that's true or not, most of the world is thinking about this time of year as the time that Christians at least celebrate the birth of Christ. It isn't accurate in terms of chronology probably when he was born. And we don't want to get caught up in paganized rituals of some kind. But the fact of the matter is, I've told you over and over again at this time of the year, I've got no problem with celebrating the birth of Christ because we want the world to be reminded that he was born, don't we? Let them put a date on it. It makes no difference to me what date they use. We ought to be smart enough to study it out and see what kind of date it might be. But that isn't what's important to me. It's that there's a reminder, a poke, a little poke. Christ was born, as the song says, in Bethlehem many years ago. I'm going to preach songs one after another if I'm not careful. Christ was born in Bethlehem, wasn't he? He was promised to be born in Bethlehem, Bethlehem of Judea. It said that a governor would come out of Bethlehem, Micah, and that God would put his authority on that individual who was born in Bethlehem of Judea. He did, didn't he? That baby was born in Bethlehem. That little baby in the manger was the rock on which the whole plan of salvation rested, and it's the rock on which it rests right now. They didn't understand who that little baby was. Herod thought he was a threat to him. He certainly did not see Jesus as the hope of salvation. He saw him potentially as a political rival. That's why he sent his troops through Bethlehem to kill every one of those young toddlers and under, because he saw Jesus as a threat to his potential authority. And Herod was a very paranoid and jealous individual. You study the life of Herod and any of the Herods, you realize there's more than one Herod in the Bible, right? There was Herod the Great. That was the father of the line. But after that, he was so full of himself, he named child after child Herod. Herod Antipas, and on and on and on. You can go into some others that have the same name as their father, and it can confuse you about how many different Herods there are in the Bible. There's several different Herods in the Bible. But Herod the Great was the one who was alive at the time that Jesus was born and was seeking to destroy him. He was an exceptionally paranoid individual, killed one of his own wives, killed some of his relatives, made sure even some of his own children didn't survive because he was fearful they would try to take his place. Shouldn't surprise you at all that he would try to kill a bunch of babies to stop the birth of one. He was too late, saints. Too late and too little. He was too late because Jesus had already been born, and once he was born, an implacable process began with the birth of Jesus that was going to bring about the salvation of all mankind. He couldn't stop it. It was already too late, but he was far too little to stop it. It wouldn't matter how many soldiers he sent out, and as horrible as it is, how many babies he killed, he could not have stopped Christ. That's another thing. You can go through your Bible, and it's very inspiring, saints, if you do. It's some pretty dark stories, but it's very inspiring if you go through your Bible and study out the line that started all the way back in the garden and ran all the way down through Abraham's seed. I mentioned this in passing here last week as well. Right down through Abraham's seed, narrowed down when it got to Judah, because certain promises were given to the line of Judah. Remember Genesis 49, a rod shall not depart from Judah, nor a scepter, until Shiloh come, and unto him will be the gathering of the people. Well, Judah it narrowed down too. Then you get a little further down the line, and there's a rod that comes out of the stem of Jesse, of the line of Judah, and a branch would grow out of his roots. That was David that was going to eventually be the forefather of Christ. So it narrowed down from the tribe of Judah, down to the family of David, and then down to the person of Christ. Over those centuries, it kept narrowing. It was an implacable promise. Nothing in heaven or on earth could have stopped that promise from coming about. That's a pretty secure thing to put your trust in, isn't it? You know, the Word of God is a sure thing. It's a sure thing, saints. He said, so is my word. Here's just one. I give you one. I give you probably 50 like this. So is my word that goeth forth out of my mouth. This is God talking. It shall not return unto me void. That means once I speak it, once I decide it's going to happen, it is going to happen, saints. That's a wonderful thing to put your trust in. A God that speaks and His words come to pass. No matter how many resist them, no matter how much power might stand against it, no power is big enough. So shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void. It shall accomplish that which I please. It will prosper in the thing whereunto I sent it. You know what's precious about that last little bit about it prospering, where it's sent? Do you know that when God spoke to your heart and you turned your life over to Him, His word took a lodging place in your heart? And if He sent His word into your heart, it will prosper, saints. I'm not talking about financial prosperity. I'm not preaching a health and wealth gospel that all you got to do is believe, no matter how wicked you are and no matter how much you might want something that God doesn't even want for you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about spiritual prosperity. I'm talking about spiritual productivity. God's word will prosper wherever He sends it. If He invested His word in your heart, He intends to produce something with it. And I'm going to tell you, God's an implacable God. He's going to have His way. Why don't you just let Him have His way? If you're feeling the God of heaven moving on you, if you feel Him asking you to come up a little higher, and if there's somebody in this building, maybe they came in the back door and are wandering the hallways. I hope they are. I hope there's 20 sinners wandering the hallway. Don't leave them out there. Open the door for them, Chad, or whoever's closest. I hope there's 100 sinners outside the doors, and I hope they all hear what I'm about to say. Now is the time. Today is the day of your visitation. Right now, today is the day. Why would you wait another day to get closer to the Lord? You may not have another day. Why would you wait any longer? And if maybe the Lord's calling you to come up a little higher in your personal life, you already are in a relationship with Him, but He's calling you to come up higher. Why would you want to dwell in a lower state of relationship with Him? If He puts His word in your heart, again, you need to understand how the word heart is used in the Bible. That's just not referring to your beater in your chest or to some feelings. Sometimes the heart is referring to the feelings, the inner feelings of an individual. But most of the time, when the word heart is being referred to, it's talking about the seat of your mind, the place where your thoughts and your feelings originate. It is both thought and feeling, though. It's what's in your mind. If you feel love for somebody or some tender emotion, listen, not something intellectual. You feel an emotion, it's coming out of your mind. Where do you think it's coming from? What part of your physical body do you think is generating your emotions? It's your mind. What part of your physical body do you think is generating your intellectual thoughts? It's your mind. So it's the seat of all of those things, your feelings, your thoughts, your intellectual thoughts, your emotional feelings. If He's put something in your heart, He intends to do something with it, saints. And I believe He's planted something in the hearts of the precious saints in this assembly. So we need to be built on the right things, don't we? We need to realize what we can put our hope and our trust and our confidence in. I said here the Word of God is something you can put your confidence in. You better realize this is not just another book. This is not just another book. This is the book. There's no other book like it. There's no other book even close to being like it. You can study why that is. There's a whole list of reasons that you could argue for why this book is different than every other book. I don't just mean every other book in a bookstore, like your fiction books or reference books or biographies. I'm talking about every other religious book. Because this isn't even in the same category of literature. This is a religious book. Why is it different from every other religious book? You ought to study it. Not just because you believe it is, you better have better reasons than just, well, I think it is. Somebody could argue you out of those reasons if you're not careful. And so, well, that's just your opinion. That's just how you feel. I feel different. You better have some stronger reasons than that. Why is this book better than any other religious book? It's real? Well, that's a very good answer. But you'd have to define that with a lot more words than one, John. It's the right answer. Real is one of those things you better fill in a lot of blanks after it. Real what? Well, it's real powerful. There's something in the words of this book you won't find the words of any other religious book. There's life-changing power in these words that don't just dictate the kind of a formulaic way that you're going to worship, like you would find in other religious books, says here's the order of how you ought to worship. This will change the whole way you operate. It will transform you into a different individual entirely. There's power in the Word of God. One of my favorite quotes about the Bible was given by Napoleon, of all people, and he was not what you consider a very religious man, though he believed in God. He was a pretty carnal individual. But Napoleon made a statement when they were talking about how powerful he was, and I appreciate that he would say this. They're talking about how he was one of the greatest generals that's ever lived. He was. That he was one of the most brilliant tactical minds that ever lived. He was. That he conquered in ways that nobody before him had done, in that part of the world at least. He did. Do you know what he said about the Bible? He said, this is a living thing that conquers everything that opposes it. It's more powerful than I could ever be, than any army I've ever led could ever be. This has defeated entire kingdoms, saints. There's kingdoms that have gone to dust because they stood against this book. And there's many more that still will. One of these days, a little stone is going to be cut out of the mountain without hands. It's going to strike the feet of the image. That image in Daniel 2 that represents the kingdoms of this world all the way down to the end. And it's going to crush the feet of that image, bring that image down, and eventually, I quoted this just a few minutes ago, blow that image to the four winds. Well, what is that talking about? That's talking about Christ. To begin with, you need to understand that Jesus is the rock upon which everything else is built. You want to find out where that's going to occur, what that little stone is, and when it's going to happen, and how it's going to happen. It might be encouraging to know, don't you think? You're looking at the world as dark as it is. Wouldn't you like to know when all this is going to come crashing down? Well, it depends on your perspective, I suppose. If you love what you're looking at around here, you may want to put your head in the ground like an ostrich and say, I don't want to see it. I don't want to know when it's going to happen. Don't tell me. I love it too much, and I don't want to see it end. You ought to be thrilled when this comes to an end. There's a better world on the other side of this mess, this present distress. There's a better world, saints. But it's going to take a little stone that will strike the feet of that image and then eventually expand out to fill the whole earth. Where does that start? You know, if you come into relationship with Christ, you're already part of what could be that little stone that's going to strike the feet of the image. Christ is the rock. He's the foundation. He's what everything else is built upon, saints. I said that little baby in the manger that is often celebrated this time of year, chronologically speaking, was the rock on which the whole plan of salvation rests. God invested every hope in that rock. Every hope for mankind is invested in Christ. That's why it's so important you be in relationship with Him. Because everything for your benefit is in Christ. Everything for your future life and the hope of immortality is in Christ. Find Him if you haven't. Enter into relationship with Him if you haven't. Build on that relationship with Him. You have to build on your relationship with Christ. You cannot just find Him and anchor yourself to Him and say, everything's going to be fine. And I've talked about this 100 times this last year. But I have made a commitment to the Lord that I believe in Him, and that's all that really matters. I believe, but I don't have to build anything on that belief. It's just belief. Well, you're going to find a long, long list of scriptures in the Bible that you're not going to be able to make any sense out of if that's how you think it works. Why are they always talking about adding? Add to your faith. You know, the Bible says that, right? Wait a second, you can't add anything to your faith. Well, then probably He shouldn't have told us, add to your faith. And by the way, He didn't just say one thing. He started out by saying, add to your faith virtue. Virtue? Why in the world would I need to be virtuous if I have the right beliefs? Now, let me tell you something. This isn't something that takes a ritualistic or some kind of mechanical method to get to. If you really have the right kind of faith, virtue will automatically be part of what's added to that. If your faith is right, it'll make you more virtuous. You really know what you believe in. You really have confidence in it. By the way, and I'm just talking to somebody, one of the ministers overseas about this. By the way, one of the meanings of the word pistis, which is faith in Greek, is not just faith in terms of what you believe, but loyalty to your beliefs. If you really believe in the right thing and you're loyal to the right thing, it'll change everything about your choices and your actions and your temperament and disposition and other things. So we got to be built on the right things, don't we? Got to start on the right foundation. The foundation of the Christian faith, this is going to sound redundant, but I mean the word faith in several ways here. The foundation of the Christian faith is faith and repentance. Now, those are two different kinds of faith in that sentence. The foundation of the Christian belief system, faith, is having the right belief and repenting. That's initially what you have to do. You've got to have the right belief. You've got to believe in the right person, don't you? You've got to believe in Jesus. What these songs were talking to us about. You've got to believe in the right person. That's the foundation. Foundation needs to be the right foundation. You build on the wrong foundation, you can build all kinds of things on the wrong foundation and end up with the wrong end result. In fact, you'll never end up with the right end result if you start with the wrong foundation. Jesus told us what the right foundation was in Matthew 16, when, this seems like we were just talking about this lately too, when He was talking to the disciples and testing them on who they thought He was. It was a very critical theological moment for them. I doubt they understood it at the time. I'm sure they had many conversations with Jesus that aren't even recorded. In fact, we know they did. It said if we were to tell all the things that Jesus said and did, all the books that are written, very hyperbolic thing to say, because 3.5 years, you know they could have written all that. It's a hyperbolic way of saying it was so much you couldn't possibly write it. So we know there's things that He talked with them about that aren't recorded. So I'm sure they had many conversations like this, but I don't think they realized the tremendous theological significance of what Jesus was asking them when He said, "Whom do men say that I am?" And they started answering. They started answering, as you know, by giving answers that they were hearing, not that was their view, but answers they were hearing, you know, like some people think you're John the Baptist. You've heard me talk about that many times. What a ludicrous argument that would be. Even if you believed in reincarnation, how would that have worked? Jesus and John were concurrent with one another for a little while. For 30 years, they were concurrent with each other. Plus, how in the world would he be John the Baptist reborn? Unless they meant by that, I would assume, if they weren't completely out of their minds, they must have meant the Spirit of the Lord that was on John the Baptist had moved to Christ when John died. Maybe that's what they meant. I'm talking about his anointing, his calling, his authorization as a prophet, whatever they might have thought. But some thought he was John, some thought he was Elijah, some thought he was different things. And of course, you know how. I'm skimming through the story because I've talked about it here lately. But you know how the conversation went. He was leading somewhere. That was a leading conversation. He got to the point, he said, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter said one of the most important statements in the entire Bible that you and I had best understand if we're going to be built in the right foundation. You can be built on a foundation that is Christ. And you want to talk about a place where true and false Christianity split? Right at that statement. You can be built on a foundation that's Christ, or you can be built on a foundation of Roman bishops and their traditions and their doctrines. You want to know why I say that? Because their entire historical basis for their authority goes back to the argument that Peter was the foundation of the church, and they argue, you can't historically argue this, but they argue that Peter was the first bishop of Rome, and thus the Roman pontiffs, the Roman popes, are the authorities who are bearing Peter's calling. Well, I think Peter would be embarrassed if that were the case. Some of the most wicked and profane individuals you'd ever meet in the history of man have been Roman popes. I think Peter would be ashamed to know that they are his heirs, they're not his heirs. That isn't even what that verse meant. It wasn't talking about the church being built on Peter. What a foolish thing to say. The church was built on Christ. Peter said to Jesus, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Peter knew exactly who Jesus was. He didn't know the details of all of what Jesus was doing or his nature of his relationship with God the Father. Certainly didn't when he made that statement. But what he said there was exactly the truth. Exactly the truth, saints. He was the Messiah. He was the Son of the living God. You don't have to add any fanciful or philosophical additions to that. It's just who he is. He is the Christ. He's the Son of the living God. And said, no man's revealed this to you. Nobody, through their own intellectual insight, revealed this to you. It was the Spirit of my Father that touched your mind and gave you this insight and understanding who I am. And notice what he said. He said, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood," that's how the King James says it, isn't it? "Hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. I say also unto thee." Now notice the language here. He is obviously making a transition. "I say also unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell are not going to prevail against it." Let me ask you something. What is it that the gates of hell can't prevail against? You have to think about that. I'm going to tell you right now, the church that claims that Peter was its first bishop, Peter was one of the first apostles. I'm talking about that system. That system that went into such terrible debauchery, the gates of hell prevailed against that system. That's the proof it's not the real church. It's not the true church. The gates of hell prevailed against it. But God has always had a people, saints, who would not be a part of that. God has always had a people who built their lives on Christ. And the gates of hell never prevailed against that precious line of people. It hasn't prevailed against them right now. And no matter how much in the minority the people of God may become as this world gets more and more wicked, waxes worse and worse, the gates of hell will never prevail against the church. Not the true church, not the true people of God. And I'm not talking about in some cultic little miniature group of people off somewhere. I'm talking about people who truly have put their trust in Christ, whose lives are built on Him. Gates of hell cannot prevail against you if you're building your life on the right foundation. Remember Jesus' beautiful statements in the Sermon on the Mount. You know, they reach kind of a pinnacle as you're going through. If you don't realize it, the Sermon on the Mount stretches over Matthew 5, 6, and 7. When you get down to the 7th chapter, it's coming to its end, you know. And the 7th chapter is very telling. It starts raising the bar a little bit as it goes on. Talking about how you'll know people, whether they're true or false, by their fruit. That's one of the things it tells you in there. That's pretty important. You'll know them by their fruit. True prophets, false prophets. Whatever the case might be, it starts to narrow that down and let you get a little bit of insight into how you can really tell whether somebody is part of the house of God, saints. That's pretty important that we know that somebody is part of the house of God. You want to know if you're part of the house of God, don't you? You go through that chapter, it'll go down from, if you start around the 12th verse maybe, I'm not going to go through it here. We could talk for hours just on that. But you start around the 12th verse maybe. It'll start with what we call the golden rule, and then it'll go into knowing people by their fruit, whether they're true or false. You know, that's a pretty important statement that fruit is important, isn't it? And then talking about doing God's will, and then finally at the end of that series of statements, it talks about building on the right foundation. Not just sitting down on the right foundation. Not just tying yourself to the right foundation. You better do that. You better anchor yourself in. You better be able to sing, "I'm anchored in Jesus," and mean it. But you're not supposed to just be sitting there on the rock with nothing having been done. You're to build on that foundation. He talked about a wise and a foolish set of builders. A foolish builder who built, but he was building on the sand. A wise builder who built, and he built on the rock. You know what the rock was? It was Christ. That wise builder wasn't building on Peter. The wise builder was building on Jesus. And as he built on that rock, something was being constructed on the rock. It wasn't just some person sitting out there. They were building something. There were 2 buildings being built in that little parable. We need to build on the right foundation, saints. And then it said the storms came and the rains came. The wind rose up. They could not move the house that was built on the rock. It was a house built there. We've got to be building up our spiritual house on the rock. That statement in Matthew 16 where Jesus said to Peter, "Thou art Peter," that's part of the misleading element of that. You know this. I've talked about it through the years a number of times. But this is an important little thing in the Greek you don't see in the English. When he said, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock," he used two different words. Their argument is, when he said, "You're Peter," he was referring to the fact that the name Peter can mean a stone or a rock, and upon this stone or rock, I'm building my church. That's demonstrated either by intentional blind bias that you know better and you're ignoring the facts, or in ignorance of the Greek. The Greek actually says, "You are Petros, and upon this Petra, I'll build my church." Those aren't even the same words. And they don't even mean the same thing exactly. They're slightly different. Petros is a rock that has been broken off, like gravel. Petra is the word in Greek that's used for bedrock, or a rock that is in its natural state. Like the rock of Gibraltar, that big cliff. That's a solid piece of rock. That's original rock. You get a little rock that's been chipped off, like where we get gravel from. That's not the same thing at all. You don't want to build your house on gravel, do you? Build it on bedrock. Build on a solid piece of rock. Peter was just one stone. You can't build your whole life on one stone. You better never build your life on one person. We've had people do that in the history of the church, you know. We've had it among us. Where people have so built their life into a specific man that if that man failed, or if that man fell, or if that man even retired or died, they were spun out. They didn't know what to do. They were in a state of complete spiritual confusion. They built their life on a stone instead of the rock. Be careful. Look, we ought to honor and respect and follow men of God as they follow Christ. But you cannot build your life on a man. If it's a man that's older than you, you're probably going to outlive him, for one thing. You can build your life on a man's teachings if they're the teachings of Christ, though. You can build your life on a man's example if that example is the example of Christ. But do you realize if a man is teaching the doctrines of Christ and he's living out the Spirit of Christ, it's not really the man you're even building your life on. It's the one who he is demonstrating to you. Christ. Christ in us, the hope of glory. Thank God for that. So be careful to rightly understand who you're building your life on. I deeply appreciate the love our assembly and the other assemblies I work with have for me, but don't you dare build your life on me. I may not be able to stay faithful. I pray I do, and I don't have any plan to do otherwise, saints. I don't have any plan to do otherwise, and by the way, I've got a very strong plan to be faithful. I'm very preemptive in my choices. I think far ahead about how will I handle these different conditions and situations. You better too. You better consider what you do if somebody tried to tempt you into immorality. You better consider what you do if somebody tried to titillate you some way to get you to do some evil sin. You better think ahead of time. How will I respond to that? You know, that's part of you being anchored in Jesus. I'm going to lock down that part of my mind. I've locked that down. I know that could lead to something that shouldn't be happening. I'm talking about any of us should have this mindset. Somebody try to build a relationship with me that isn't an appropriate relationship through just emotional reaching out or other things. I already know ahead of time. I'm not going to allow that to happen. You can love people without getting into the wrong kind of love. And you better be able to do it. So you better preemptively anchor yourself into your faith. I'm not going to be moved. In order to be able to say that, you better know what it is you're standing on, saints. You better know what your beliefs are. You better know what you're committed to. Anchor yourself to the relationship. You better anchor yourself to your relationship with Christ. That's the rock we build our lives upon. So Peter was just a stone, and you know, this is just a perfect example of one of the things that probably would have quickly been a question in the church against that teaching if they'd ever let the people have Bibles. They didn't let the people have the Bibles in their native tongue. You had to listen to the priest preach it in Latin if you could even understand what they were saying, and then for them to explain what they were saying, and you certainly couldn't have it in your native tongue. Well, if you had it in your native tongue, you might have just rambled on. Ramble's not a good thing to do when you're in the Bible, by the way, but I'm going to use it that way. You might have rambled from Matthew 16 down to 1 Peter 2, where Peter, the very person Jesus was talking to, says this. He says, "To whom coming..." I'd have to start at the beginning of the chapter if I'm going to quote it by memory. Give me the first word or two, 1 Peter 2. You're not in 1 Peter 2 already? Of course you're not. "Wherefore, laying aside all malice, all guile, and hypocrisy, All evil speakings, as newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word that you may grow thereby. If so be it you've tasted that he's gracious. Now here's the verse I was wanting. I just for some odd reason couldn't start it without the one before. To whom coming as unto a living stone. See, Jesus is the living stone. That's where our life comes from. To whom coming is unto a living stone. Disallowed indeed of men. Most men don't want Jesus. They're not going to accept Jesus. What do you think is more important, man's opinion or God's? Disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious. You better believe anything chosen of God is precious. That ought to encourage you individually. Do you know if God's put his hand on you and he's chosen you, in his eyes you are precious? Isn't that precious? Too many preciouses in one sentence? It ought to be precious to you. To think that God's chosen you, because what God has chosen is precious to him. Chosen of God and precious. Ye also, is that the next phrase? Ye also, now notice this is another also. Remember what Jesus said? He used that word also back there in Matthew 15, didn't he? Or 16. You also, as lively stones. See, we're not the living stone, we're lively stones, and those are not the same thing. There's one living stone. And there's a lot of lively stones, stones that have life in them. You know where we get our life from? From him. From the living stone. Not from us. If Peter was the foundation of the church, the life of the church was coming from him. Peter was a great and godly man. But Peter was not where the source of life was coming from. Peter died, saints. But we have one that ever liveth, praise his holy name, to make intercession for us. A great high priest in the heavens, the apostle and high priest of our faith. He's still alive. He's the one who said, I am he that liveth and was dead. And behold, I am alive forevermore. That is the living stone you build your life on, not a man. That's the living stone. But when we build on him, his life permeates us. And we become lively stones. Part of what you're feeling when you feel the Spirit in a service like we started with here, you're feeling the life coming through the living stone. You hear how I just worded that? He has life in and of himself, but it comes through him because it's coming from somewhere. That life that God put in his Son can permeate your life and give you the very life that comes from the great and almighty God of heaven. So build your life on the right thing. You can be a lively stone. That doesn't just mean lively. We use the word lively today. It means somebody's full of energy, you know. Well, I hope you are. Brother Lee is a lively individual. I love watching Brother Lee in service. He's lively. Praise the Lord. That is a beautiful response. There's a liveliness. That's not what the lively really means, though it's what's producing that liveliness. What that word lively means is full of life, not just energy. Quickened, full of life. Spiritual life. It'll cause you to move around sometimes. It's hard to sit still when you're feeling life. It is somewhat related to your personality. I have watched ministers stand in a pulpit that don't even move. They don't even move their feet much. I'm moving all kinds of different positions. I've seen ministers that stand there as staid as could be. I'm not criticizing that. That may be their personality. I've seen ministers that can't have a sermon without running around the building while they're preaching. That is driven personality. We ought not to mimic one another and say, well, since that brother gets so fired up, I better get... If you get fired up, you may be in your own spirit. Let the Lord touch you how he touches you. I have a hard time standing still when I'm feeling the Spirit of God. I'm not somebody that's very likely... I said one time, if you see me tear around the church, you better believe something's going on because that's so different than my personality. You know that something's going on if I start running around the church. So now they're all trying to get me to run around the church. They're not telling me to run, but they're thinking, pray that Brother Bear will run around the church. Isn't that terrible? Well, that may not be the way that I worship, but I cannot stand still here. I can't. There's too much life going on in the words of God for me to be able to just stand still and talk about them without turning around and around and around and making you dizzy. Don't get dizzy unless you're dizzy under the feeling of the Spirit of God. Thank God for that life, Brother Lee. Thank God for what we feel when we hear the Word of God. Thank God for what we feel when we hear the music raising our emotional awareness into a link up with the Spirit of the living God right in third heaven. Your emotions link up with the emotions of God. God has emotions. He feels things. God is not a God that doesn't feel anything. He feels things. He wants you to feel what He's feeling. He feels joy. He wants you to feel joy. He's sorrowing over something. He wants you to sorrow over it. You've got to get your emotions in tandem with the emotions of God. Part of that is building, as I said, on His Son, because if you have built yourself on the living stone, there'll be life coming through that stone. God, if He touched you through His Son Jesus, has given life through that living stone. So thank God for the life that we get through the relationship we have with Christ. Praise His holy name. So to whom coming is unto a living stone. He was disallowed indeed of men, but He is chosen of God and precious. And we are lively stones that are built upon that living stone. And we're built up. This is back to Matthew 7 now. Remember, He's building a house on the stone. Both men are building a house, just one's not building on the stone. We're built up a spiritual house that we might offer up spiritual sacrifices. That's strange, isn't it? I thought sacrifices were over with. No more sacrifices, right, after the sacrifice of Christ? Well, you notice it didn't say that we should offer up animal sacrifices, did it? Didn't say we should offer up natural sacrifices. It said spiritual sacrifices. It used to be that an animal would die for your sin. Christ replaced those animals dying for your sin, but there's more to it than that. You've got to die to yourself as well. You've got to be a spiritual sacrifice and say, I'll sacrifice my will like Jesus did. Didn't He sacrifice His will? I'll sacrifice my will like He did. He was a spiritual sacrifice. I'll be a spiritual sacrifice. Don't you want to be like Jesus? Well, if you want to be like Jesus, you're going to have to follow the path He set. There's a reason for the details of some of the things Jesus did. Even the fact that He was baptized in water, He didn't need to be baptized in water. For what? What did He need to repent of? What did He say to John when John said, phew, and I would have said the same thing, and I think if you had any sense, you'd say the same thing if Jesus showed up and asked you to baptize Him. What did He say to John? What did John say to him, I should say? Look, I'm not the one to baptize you. Again, you have to fill in the blanks. You don't need to be baptized. You're the one that I need to baptize me. And what did Jesus say in response to that? Well, if you're going to use the King James, which is a little archaic sounding, suffer it to be so. In other words, allow it, so that all righteousness would be fulfilled. What righteousness? Jesus didn't have anything He needed to be baptized out of, but He was setting a pattern for us. We need to look and say, Jesus went through a certain process. He wants me to follow in His footsteps. We're to be followers of Christ. We're to be followers of those who are followers of Christ. If somebody's truly following Christ, why would you not follow them? But they need to be following Christ. Because we're all trying to be footstep followers of Christ, aren't we? To build our life on Him. So what does the rest of that statement in 1 Peter 2 say? Wherefore also it's contained in the Scripture, Behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone. That's Jesus. That's not Peter. That's Jesus. Elect, chosen. That means I chose Him. He was the one I wanted. He was the only one God was going to use. Precious. And he that believeth on Him shall not be confounded. In Isaiah, I think it is, where it quotes that, it might be around 16th verse, He said that He will not make haste. Well, you know, that's what happens when you're confounded. When you're not sure about something, you can make some hasty decisions. You can make some poor decisions when you're not certain about something. You need to be certain about Jesus. He that believeth in Him shall not be confounded. What's the next word or two? In the 7th verse. Who's got it in front of them? I'm going to think of it before you get it if you don't hurry up. Unto you, therefore, which believe, He is precious. He's precious to us who believe in Him, isn't He? But unto them which be disobedient, the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner. And a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. Even unto them which be disobedient, whereunto they also were appointed. Now I'm quoting it quicker, so I may be getting out of order. Now what does He say? But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. Which I like. I like the word peculiar because we're peculiar. That isn't what the Greek word means, but there's nothing wrong with that point because we're very peculiar. We better be peculiar. If this is a world that is in darkness, you ought to be the most peculiar individual walking around here. Shouldn't you? You know what peculiar means? We don't use that word very often. It means different, odd, strange, kind of befuddling to people. What's with that guy? Why does Jesus mean so much to him? Why has He put Jesus in such a high priority? It's one of my favorite parts of the Song of Solomon is when she goes down through that list, the Shulamite, describing him, and the daughters of Jerusalem are saying to her, what is so great about your beloved over every other beloved? She gives one of the most powerful poetic lists of things talking about his qualities. Then she gets down to the end, and it all was, I can feel it right now, I even quoted it to you. I can feel it tingling, wash over me, even thinking about it. Maybe you won't feel it, but I hope you do, because this is a precious thing. She said, he is my beloved. He is my friend. She went through down all those powerful statements. Then she ends it by saying, you want to know what's really so precious about him? He's the one I love. He's my friend. Is he your friend?
Yes, he is. Praise God.
That's so simple, but so precious. We should be peculiar, saints. That is not what it says there in the Greek. That word actually means purchased. We're a purchased people. But I'm going to tell you, if you've been purchased out of the darkness of this world, you will be very peculiar. If Jesus has taken you out of the world, and if he's made you separate from the world, you're going to be very peculiar in their eyes. You should be. You could read on through that chapter, but just that verse or two after that is a precious statement. You're a chosen generation, royal priesthood, holy nation, peculiar people. That you should, here's our responsibility, show forth the praises. How's that for an interesting way to say it? To shew forth the praises. How do you shew forth praise? Say it.
In our life.
In our life is the best way to show forth praise. What better praise could you give to God than to live a life that's pleasing to him? You can go out there and talk about how great God is, but if your life does not match the magnification you're making of God, you'll make him look littler in people's eyes. It's like turning the binoculars around. You know how binoculars work. You look through the right side and everything zooms in bigger. You look through the wrong side, it all looks smaller. If your life is not matching the God you're serving, you're going to flip the binoculars over on him. He's going to look little and insignificant. Do you really want to do that? You want to make God look littler? Do you know one of the most common things to say about God in the Bible in terms of praising him and lifting him up is magnify the Lord. Magnify the Lord with me. Well, that means to lift him up. But you know what lifting someone up is about? Making them more visible. When you lift a king up, higher, up on a platform or up on a palanquin or something, you're making him more visible to everybody. We want God to be more visible. We want Jesus to be more visible, saints. We want to lift him up with our lives. Not just with our voices, not just with our teaching or our preaching or our belief system, but with what it has done in our lives. Truth and practice. So magnify the Lord with me. Thank you, Sister Heather. I wasn't even looking for that verse. Let us exalt his name together. You know, if we're all living in a way that's pleasing to God, we'll be exalting his name. There in Psalm 34:3. The rest of that statement in 1 Peter 2, he says that we should show forth the praises of him who hath called us. Glad you've been called, saints? Out of darkness. That ought to reinforce how wonderful it is to be called. Who wants to be wandering around the darkness? Nobody in their right mind, unless you're trying to hide something. You know what one of the most incredible things is when there's nothing left to hide? People are very scared of having their inner life revealed, having their inner thoughts. And certainly they should be in many cases, because sometimes what we're thinking isn't right. We're thinking things about other people or in a lot of different ways that could be wrong. How many of us really, don't raise your hand, how many of us really want our inner thoughts out on a board, on a video screen for the whole church to see every service? Even during church. Isn't that a shame? I didn't say at home sitting in front of a television or somewhere off in a bad area you shouldn't be. I mean sitting in church, the thoughts that run through the person's mind. We want our thoughts, our mind to be dealt with, don't we? He's called us out of darkness. Look, if you've really been called out of darkness, the end result of that is that everything will be in the light. But the only way you're going to feel good about everything being in the light is if there's nothing that could ever be in the light that would shame you. You've got to come to a place where you can shine the light on my life, not because you're proud or arrogant about your life, but because the Lord, look what He's done for me. I don't mind now, saints, going back. I'm not going to do it here this morning. I'm already running later than I wanted to. I don't mind going back and talking about my testimony, talking about how the Lord took me out of the deep miry clay. And by the way, do not follow in my footsteps, young people. Don't think because I have this testimony that, wonderful, let me get one too. I'll leave church. I'll have a testimony like Brother Bear. I have a powerful testimony, not of anything I did, but what God did for me. I may have never been able to really realize the value of that if I hadn't been out of church, because I grew up in church, and it's so easy to not realize how precious what you have is. Don't forget how precious what you have is, children. Don't forget how precious what you have is, young people. You may not understand it right now, but I pray to God you never have to go through something like I went through to recognize how precious what I had was and make me want to come back. Thank God He let me come back. He's done that for all of us. It just may not be in the same way. In some ways, some of us, it has been so subtle because you might have grown up in church and always been in church, but that did not make you saved just because you were born in church. You still have a nature and a condition that's got to be dealt with. You're going to have to turn to the Lord. It doesn't matter if mom and dad are saved or if your whole family is saved or if from the moment you were born you've been sitting in the pew in one form or another. You have to have a relationship with the Lord. You've got to recognize your debilitated state and turn to God. So He's called us out of darkness into His marvelous light. But I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, act like a stranger and a pilgrim, saints. Don't act like you belong in this world. Act like you don't belong in this world. Don't act like this is home and I'm going to make myself at home. You ought not to be at home in a fallen world. You ought to be a stranger and a pilgrim. Abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. Having your conversation honest among the Gentiles. Now look, they might speak of you as evildoers. Isn't that ridiculous? Do you realize right now we're living in that exact kind of day? Yeah. They will say if you don't go along with the cultural beliefs of this present day, you're an evil individual. Do you know how much they've turned the moral compass around backwards? They will tell you you are wicked because you don't agree with their wickedness. It just gets turned entirely around. It's like a compass that you're thinking it's pointing north, but that compass is so damaged, you're actually going the exact opposite direction. That's where this world's at. They will call you an evil individual because you don't tolerate evil. Don't let this world turn you around backward. Let your moral compass guide you to true north, saints. Let your moral compass guide you toward heaven. We're climbing to higher ground. Now there's another song, Marching to Zion. That song just hit me. We're marching to Zion, aren't we? We're not marching down into the lowlands. We're not going down in among the people like when they were building the wall. Kept trying to get Nehemiah to come down. Come down. Come down off the wall. You know, that wall isn't going to protect you anyway. It's not strong enough to protect you. You know what they said? If a fox jumps up on your wall, the wall will collapse. What kind of protection do you think you've got? When this world looks at the barriers and boundaries that we have around our lives, they don't think that they mean a thing, saints, but they're powerful enough to take you to eternal life and immortality if you'll stay inside. That wall will protect you. There's no power that can cross that boundary that God places between your life and the world if you'll stay inside the walls. Later in the story, through those several temptations Nehemiah went through and troubles, they said, come down and meet us in the plain of Ono. Well, you got to answer just by saying the name, oh no. That's what he essentially said. I'm not coming down. I'm too busy to come down. Now, you better get busy enough about the things of God. You don't have time for the things of the world, saints. We're building on a foundation. We want to make sure we're building on the right foundation, don't we? We want to make sure we're built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets. That's in Ephesians 2. Jesus Christ, though, Himself. See, someone might pull that part. This is how people love to cherry pick scriptures. Well, Peter's the foundation. It's the foundation of the apostles and prophets. Jesus Christ Himself being the chief cornerstone. Is that around 2:19? That's our cornerstone. There are teachings. There are great and mighty men of God that have walked this earth. I hope they're still doing it today, who are teaching the right things. And you can build your life on what is being taught. You can build your life on the example, if it's a godly example, they're setting. But Jesus is the chief cornerstone. And He's what we have to, as men of God, build our lives around to make sure they're plumb and level with the right things. So we're built upon that. It's one verse later, and I thought, isn't it? 20th verse. Upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ Himself being the chief cornerstone. Thank God for the cornerstone. Thank God we're built on that foundation.
In the name of the Lord. Hallelujah. Praise God. Praise God. Can we just take a little while just to praise the name of the Lord together? Bless your holy name. Thank you, Jesus. Praise your holy name. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Praise the name of the Lord. Bless indeed the name of the Lord. My name is Brother Daniel Regis. I'm from West Palm Beach, Florida, under the ministry of Brother Regis. Well, he's my father. So I I'm blessed and feel like it's a privilege to be here.
Our privilege.
It's all right to be here, but my brother Bear and sister Bear, and one of the family of God, and of course, the precious people of God. It's a mighty and wonderful thing. For years, I've been on the site, on the website, and it's amazing how I came across your website. I was looking for ways to help the young people in my church. And I'll give you more of a background and some color behind it. One of the things that a lot of the young people came to me and they said, Brother Daniel, we noticed that a lot of our things are not written. Our messages are not written. We say the body of Christ, and if I go to any other type of religion, I can find some documentation. I can find some sermons, and I can find some literature and get some references. And I said, well, that gave a charge to me to say, I need to seek. And of course, I reached out to my father and I spoke with him and I said, Dad, what can we do in this situation? He says, well, we can look at some different manners, and there's some brothers that I know, but being a researcher, and we're taught in school to research. Go to Google. Everything is Google, right? You can go to Google and you can find things. So I came across, I'm just researching, and I started looking at all churches that had gospel assembly in it throughout the country. That's what I started doing. Went to gospel assembly, and then of course this church brought me to this link, and you go to a different link and it brought you. And I came across Mansfield Gospel Assembly, and I looked at the name and I saw the brother name, and there was Brother Daniel. I said, wow, great. What a coincidence. We got the same name. What a coincidence. And I just start going through and reading and requested for a password and start listening to the message. And I said, wow, I love this. I love this brother. I fell in love. You know how to say you fell in love first sight? It was at first word. I fell in love with Brother Bear. So I've utilized this church, has been a blessing to me. Y'all don't even know me, but y'all been a blessing to me. And I want to say thank you, Brother Bear. I want to say thank you to Sister Bear, because you allow him the liberty to put all this material together. And I know it takes, being married myself, I know how it's tough. It's tough. You're taking time away. But I'm actually in Ohio, came in for work. I'm a construction project manager. We have a headquarters down in Florida. I'm pretty sure you guys maybe heard of NTB or Midas. We have the parent company that's down in Florida. And with the sites, all the retail locations and sites, one of my responsibilities is just making sure that they're built up to code and do make sure that everything is fine. So most of my meetings are 15 minutes. I do a walkthrough and get back on the flight and go home. So this time around, I said, I want to make sure I take the opportunity to spend some time with the precious people of God in Mansfield. I thank the Lord that, usually I fly in directly into Cleveland, but this time I came through Columbus and it was much smoother. It was much a smooth ride. I was like, praise the Lord. This is much smoother. Turbulence was less. And, in Cleveland, it gets real nasty and it rains all the time. But it was so much smoother. And I just felt like it was a blessing just to be here. And my wife said to me, married with with a beautiful sister, Sister Fania, who's put up with me for 13 years. And I thank God for her. But my children, they were saying, Dad, we want to come up with you. And I said, well, next time we'll definitely do that. We'll make a trip of it. And it's like, most of all, they want to come and see snow. That was the whole reason. There was an agenda behind it. They wanted to come and see snow. That was the first thing they said. I don't think they're ready for it. We took them up on their first trip to New York, and for Thanksgiving we have our some family members there, and the first thing they told me was, Daddy, it's too cold. I was like, well, if it was too cold, you're not going to be able to handle the snow. So my children, and they were really, really pushing to see if they can be here, but maybe in the spring we'll make a time to really come together and worship with you all. Happy to finally see Brother Lee, and a lot of the audio, I always hear his voice, but to see him in person at 93 years old, praise. Next month, praise the name of the Lord. We already proclaimed it. We declared that in Jesus' name you'll see it. Amen. Blessed be the name. 93 years. We'll talk after service. You got to tell me what's the secret, what you got to do to keep you so vibrant. I want to be able to do that when I'm 93 years old. You know, but I could tell it's the love of God that you have in your life, that He has pricked your heart and He has touched your heart and He has convicted you, and then you feel compelled to continue serving the Lord. And you can see that being magnified, and you can see that being manifested in the way that you praise, and the way that everyone I've seen that was just really in the presence of the Lord. I feel at home. I feel at home. Where this is how we have service at home. This is how we have service at home. So it's a blessing and a privilege. I appreciate the words that were shared this morning, and I appreciate the way that Brother Barry, you allowed the Spirit of the Lord just to utilize you. You touched on some things that I prayed about, that I was asking God for insight about, and you touched on it.
Thank you, Lord.
You touched on it immediately, and I've been praying. You know, that's how great God works. Came over 1,000 miles to get the answer that I needed.
Praise God.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Lord.
He works in wonderful and mysterious ways. This is the God that we're serving. This is the God that we're serving. As you was testifying about how the Lord has brought you to this congregation, and you know, you said you want to make sure that the Lord doesn't allow you to fail, and that's something that I've always been asking of the Lord. Yes. And I said, Lord, if my father's of age, he's getting of age, and so subtly he always says to me, Daniel, you know, you're next in line. I said, well, I have an older brother. I'm the youngest out of 5. I'm the youngest. He says, well, God doesn't look at that. But He never pushes me. But He's always said to me, I call you Daniel for a reason. And Brother Regis, he came from Haiti. So if anybody's familiar with the island of Haiti or have been in Haiti, but he's with Haitian descent. He came from Haiti, and then we moved over to Chicago, specifically in Sterling, for a little bit under Brother Welsh ministry. For many years, he was getting his toolage and learning about the Word and about the message of the body of Christ. He's been in ministry for over 47 years. 47 years, been in the ministry for 47 years, but been in the body of Christ since he was 16. So as a young person, and he's always shared with me, said, Daniel, you know, and as young people, and I'm saying I'm not that young. I'm 38, but I consider myself young. But as someone young, we always try to find a way to try to escape and not take responsibility. We don't want to stand in a situation, you know, of saying that, especially when it comes to ministry. I'm sharing this because of anybody that has that heart, that has the feeling, has a thought to be in ministry, not to be afraid. And through your testimony, and I wish I could hear the entire testimony, but not to be afraid, because God is with you.
That's right.
As long as you're doing it with the right motive, the right intention,
that's right,
the Lord will be with you.
Yes, He will.
And if you're serving properly, you're doing the right thing, the Lord will always stand with you.
Yes, He will.
So and as years has progressed, and my thoughts I've gotten more mature. And it takes a big thing is to be more mature with the Lord and reading His Word more and wanting to seek Him. As I've gotten more mature, I'm getting more comfortable with it. I'm getting more comfortable, not to say that, it means it's not to lead, but it's to serve. I'm getting comfortable with the principle of serving.
Right.
That's what Christ did. That's all He did. He didn't look to lead men, but He looked to serve them. And from His servitude, from what He did, that brought people closer to the Lord, and seeing the cross and understanding, to have that belief. And I appreciate the words that Brother Bear stated about not being built upon one person or a man, but to be built on Christ, on the rock. That's the most important thing, is to have that sure foundation. And you said that in Isaiah, I believe it was in Isaiah 28:16. It's that sure foundation. That's what the Lord is. He is that sure foundation. He is a sure foundation. I thank the Lord for what he's doing. Amen. I thank the Lord for how he's touching our lives and removing the veil from our eyes. As you believe, as you're getting more of that alliance and having that covenant with the Lord, there's mysteries he is going to reveal unto you as you continue to have that covenant. It can be a difficult thing to do. It can be a very difficult thing to do, but it's not hard, because if you do it with the right, again, motives, the Lord will be with you. The Lord will be with you. Thank you for receiving me. I appreciate the hospitality, the love that I feel. I definitely feel the love of the Lord in this place. As I was walking in, I can feel that even though it's cold outside, but there's a warmth of love in this place. Hallelujah. I felt it from the handshake, the smile. You know, there's a lot of places that you go. And I've gone to a lot of different churches, seen a lot of different churches. You don't get a smile from anybody. They just walk and they just look at you like, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. You don't belong here. They just look at you like you don't belong here. But I thank God for the smile that I see, that means there's a joy, hallelujah, that's in your heart. And we know that the joy of the Lord is our strength, hallelujah. And I can see that strength in the people of God here in Mansfield. I see that strength. I'm excited. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what else to say. I feel like shouting and getting excited. I just thank God for being here. It's one thing to hear something, to hear the word, and it's one thing to see someone's picture, but it's something else to see it in flesh, in person. I thank God for the vision of the body of Christ. I thank God that he has placed his lighthouse here in Mansfield. Hallelujah. I thank God for what he's doing. I understand that, this is a time to, I don't want to hold you too long in my words. I don't want to hold you because I can go on and on, but I'm just excited to be in this place. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be with you all. I want to tell you that I love you. I love you. And appreciate all of you. Appreciate the Bear family. Appreciate all of you. And I love you. Let's hold on to this message. Let's continue going beyond the four walls. Let's go beyond that. Right. There's people that are hurt. Yes. There are people that are depressed. There are individuals that need to feel the love that we're speaking of. Brother Bear was speaking about it earlier. They need to feel that love. Yes, don't feel shy. And I know I can tell a lot of you not shy, but don't feel shy to speak and to witness and to reach out to that individual. The Spirit of the Lord compels you and pushes, and you feel in your heart, reach out to that individual and bring him to a place where they can feel love. They can feel love. And this is what we have in this place. Amen? Amen. I thank you. I appreciate y'all. There's a song that we sing in Creole. It says that I feel Jesus. And it says, I feel Jesus in this place. Touch my soul, Lord. Burn within me. I feel Jesus in this place. And in Creole, it simply says, Senti Jésus. Senti Jésus. Senti Jésus. Na plaça. Touchez Seigneur. Seigneur is Lord. Touchez cœur moi. Senti Jésus. Na plaça. I feel the Lord in this place. May the Lord bless you all.
Praise God. Praise God. Praise God. Thank you, Lord.
Praise the Lord. That's an important exhortation. Keep on holding to his hand. Keep on pressing towards heaven's wonderful land. Praise his holy name, saints. We don't want to ever let go of his hand, do we? We don't want to ever keep pressing towards heaven's wonderful land. What a beautiful series of songs here, and good sweet covering of the Spirit that we felt as we were responding to that. When you can tell the Spirit is present, then get close to the Spirit. Get into the Spirit. In order to be more Spirit-led, you're going to have to be more familiar with the Spirit. You're going to have a sensitivity to the Spirit. That's going to take some exposure, isn't it? Getting used to the work of the Spirit. And I mean in the sense of what you feel in the Spirit. You can feel some things from the Lord, can't you? Thank God for that. Thank God for the security we have that was expressed to us in some of these songs. What we're building our life upon are some of these very things that were talked about in these songs. Somebody give me the names of each of these songs we just sang. See how good your notes are if you take notes on those sort of things. If that isn't love, do you think it was anything less than the greatest example of love, what Jesus expressed through his actions? What was Love Dottie Rambo's way of wording that? It gets you thinking. It's almost backwards the way you'd think of that kind of a statement. If that isn't love, then the oceans are dry. Are the oceans dry? No. Are there no birds? Is that what the next part says in the sky? Or stars? All right. Birds, stars, there's all kinds of stuff up there, isn't there? There's no stars in the sky if that's not love. You can see the stars up there once in a while, can't you? Once in a while, the conditions of this earth mask the stars. Now, I'm not getting deeply symbolic in that. But once in a while, the conditions of this world mask the stars. You may not be able to tell they're up there. The degree of light we might have in a largely populated area. This isn't a tremendously populated area. It's about 50-some thousand people in this city. But you can get to some cities where you're not going to see the stars at all unless you go quite a way into the countryside, because of the ambient light and other light that's just shining off of that city through street lights and lights that are on in homes and other things that might mask the stars, but they're still up there. There's some things that might mask your realization of the love of Christ, but it's still there. There's some conditions of this world, if you're not careful, they'll put a mask over the realization of how great his love is. You'll start feeling like, well, if he would let me go through this, does he really love me? It's where he's bringing you that'll be the greatest